Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike.
Hey.
What's up?
It's a new dawn, new day. How you doing?
Doing all right. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about today. We're not
a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about.
So, in case you were hiding under a rock all weekend, AMG announced a brand new game called Star Wars Legion. The good news is your old Legacy Legion models are compatible with this new game.
Some of them. There's an asterisk there because some of us cannot use some of our models.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Most of them are compatible with this new game.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it today on the show. They called it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We should talk about what actually. So they called it a quote refresh, not a new edition of Star Wars Legion. I don't know why they're so afraid to call it a new edition.
The fact that they're able to say that with a straight face, like I've played this game, like I played the new rules like several times at this point, and new rules isn't even fair. It's a new game.
Yeah, which look, I have not had a chance to play it yet, so my takes are based on that. Ultimately, I'm not sure whether it's like a lot of this stuff. It's just too much information, so I'm not going to be sure on it. But what I am very sure on is that it is very different.
Yes, it is. It is. So, at this point, I am not willing to say it is good or bad, but it is definitely not the thing that we have been playing for the last 5 years.
Yeah, it might still be fun, but it will be a different kind of fun than what I've been having for the last 5 years.
I've seen a lot of people be like, it's still the button, like nuts and bolts of Legion, and I don't really want to like rain on people's parades too hard, but if that's how you feel, you probably did not understand Legion the way that you needed to play competitively before this update. Is kind of how I'm feeling. Like if that is the conclusion you've come to.
I mean, the only way really it's the same is that you have Star Wars minis and you make attacks and roll dice.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Those are the ways that it's the same. Which, look, again, I don't know whether it's good or bad, but anyway, we're going to go over the there are so many changes that they will not all be in this episode. We're going to go over kind of like the biggest, highest level, most fundamental core mechanic changes on this episode. And then we're going to briefly hit the roadmap because there was some cool new stuff in there that we can talk about. Not a lot of like details on that stuff, so that's definitely not going to be the bulk of the episode, but we will get to that stuff. They also did a bunch of like unit and command card and upgrade card updates, which we will not talk about in this episode unless they're relevant to the games that Mike played, which they might be in some cases. But generally,
I mean they are because all the units are different. But,
right,
yes.
Yeah. This is not the episode where we go through and talk about all the unit changes.
Yeah,
because I mean we could probably do an episode on each faction.
We've got just in what's been released so far, like we've probably got like 8 episodes full of non-repeatable change content
Yes.
to talk about, frankly. Like we're gonna this is like 8 to 12 hours of we need to kind of go through this piece by piece,
Yeah, and
and
supposedly
discuss it.
there's a part two coming with the unit
I
changes
mean,
too.
there's
So
there's definitely a part two coming because A, they said it, and B, they only refreshed like I haven't actually done the count, but like they only refreshed like 2 or 3 rebel heroes and they all needed it. Though yeah, we'll get to that.
yeah, I mean it's like if they intend to go back and hit all of the units, which would certainly be ambitious, but with the new not addition, that's something that's not uncommon to do. They've only done like 20% of them basically. So yeah, very much possible there's more to come. We're not actually getting the cards for any of these units until next summer. So if that update includes, part two, as they called it, then I guess that would make sense. Um, but yeah. So how about should we just dive right in here?
Let's get in there,
A
Kyle. Let's
lot of
do
these
it.
changes are like all related. Uh, so uh, we're going to try and sort of do this in order, but yeah. So the first thing that changed is, uh, well, there's several related things here. So they took all of the battle cards and they just pitched them. All the old battle cards, objectives, deployments, conditions, done, gone, out of the game, not used anymore. So they replaced them with 6 new mission cards, which are now a combination of deployment and objective on the same thing, tied to each other.
These are called primary objectives.
Yes, primary objectives. There's a new type of card called secondary objectives, which are like other less valuable ways to score, and then there are what they call advantages, which is like each player gets one of those, and it's a specific thing that they can do.
Yeah, I would describe advantages at this point as player specific conditions, conditional benefits. It's like so if you got a condition card under the old rules that only benefited you, that's what an advantage is.
Yeah, significantly watered down from like the impact of the old school condition cards. It seems like for the most part, but yeah, that's
They're wildly different in impact on the game, I would say.
from the old conditions or from each other.
Both.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, as I was reading through most of them, I was kind of underwhelmed by most of the effects, but some of them looked like, man, there are a handful of these that are clearly significantly better than the other ones. But
Yeah. And I would say like everything else we are going to talk about today, um, looking at any of these changes in relevance to our old baseline is not super helpful. Like being like, oh, I can put 3 barricades down. That's sort of like fortified positions. It's like, yeah, it's sort of like fortified positions, but it's also cover doesn't matter anymore, like
yeah,
so, which we'll get to.
we'll get to that. All right, let's talk about the missions first.
Yep.
So 6 new missions. There's this new term called POI, which is point of interest.
Yep.
Which basically is a 2-inch diameter thing that they haven't given us, but we have, I guess, paper print and play for. I'm sure that the community will immediately and already has start selling like 3D printed 2-inch wide discs.
I'm pretty sure that there are free STLs available from multiple third-party markets that people can download. So I would advise people to do that immediately.
Yeah, please don't use the paper. Paper is like a horrible way to do any of this.
I don't want to dwell on this, but I cannot believe that they released this without giving us solid, actual point of interest that you can place on the table.
That they could sell for money.
Yes,
Like,
like the profit portion of this aside.
I mean, people would be snapping. You'd sell out whatever, however many you made of, expansions. Excuse me. That had a 3-inch range ruler. Sorry, we'll get to that. And point of interest tokens in it. You could sell each of those for like 15, $20, and they would sell out of this.
They need a new essentials kit is really what it comes
Right,
down
exactly.
to,
Yeah.
and because
Yeah, throw
there's
some extra range rulers or whatever in there. Whatever.
yeah. Anywho, I don't want to
Missed
dwell on it,
opportunity.
but
Yeah.
it's
Anyway,
yeah.
so there's these new things, point of interest tokens. They're 2 inches wide. They're your new objective tokens
Uh,
ish.
they are
They're points on the map.
well, I want to be very careful
Okay.
about calling them new objective tokens
Sure,
because
yes.
old objective tokens still exist.
Okay, fair.
These are just a different type of objective token that does not replace the old objective tokens.
Yeah. Okay, fair. I've seen people basically saying that you can use like speeder bike or deca bases for these. Those are not the same size. Those are not 2-inch bases.
I think
They're sort of close.
they're extremely close. It's like a millimeter off. It is.
Is it really that small?
It
Okay.
is. It is. It's like hairs, pencil.
Okay. So I guess you could like in a pinch, if you haven't got an STL file, you could probably, it's way better than using paper to use one of those.
I've been using deca bases because frankly they just stay on the table better than paper. They don't blow around when someone breathes.
Yep.
So I think until you get a printed one, use speeder bike bases.
Yeah. Anyway, they are basically the new focus of all of these missions. All 6 of these missions have POI tokens in them. They all go at fixed locations on a grid for each of these missions. And all of them are essentially just different versions of area control missions. Like you basically score all of these by having unit, or in some cases like specific units, I guess really just in one case specific units, near the point of interest tokens. The primary difference, and since you've played several games, stop me if any of this is incorrect, but the primary difference between the missions is the location of the tokens and how much they're worth to score.
I would add a third thing on there.
Okay.
And that is the condition for being able to score it while around it. So there are 2 pretty important kind of like on-off switch terms that the objective cards refer to. The first is contested. The second is secured.
Okay.
You contest an objective if you have a unit at range 1/2 of it,
which is 3 inches.
Which is 3 inches. And you secure an objective if you have more contesting units on that objective, on that point of interest, than your opponent does. This is important because some of these cards only require you to contest an objective to score it, and some of them require you to secure it, which is a fairly large difference in that contesting it, you can kind of like sacrifice a unit and like toss it in there at the end of the turn to like score a unit or score it or prevent your opponent from securing it, or whatever. Some of them refer to like, you only get victory points as long as your opponent is not contesting your points of interest or whatever. So those 2 terms, contested and secured, are fairly important in how they work. But at the end of the day, they are all area control scenarios in the vein of intercept the transmissions. There's no picking up boxes and moving them around the map. There's no scoring units in deployment zones like breakthrough. There's no bombing run bombs. There's no hostages. There's none of that.
And notably, there's no variation on deployment mission combination because the deployments are tied to the missions.
Yes, and I would say, uh, for the most part, every mission is basically just battle lines.
Yeah, that's what it
But
looks like to me.
it's a little bit more complicated than that when you get down to like a couple of them, but for the most part, um, it is like battle lines. And at the end of the day, we'll get to some of the other major changes, but your deployment zones also don't really matter a ton.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about it now, right?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
because you de you don't deploy in your deployment zone. You move onto the table from where the deployment zone meets the table edge, right?
Yes. Um, which so there are a couple of things here. First, I think to frame this properly, Legion is now a 5-turn game and not a 6-turn game. They have cut out a turn and also cut out deployment so that you deploy by moving onto the table turn
Okay.
one. Which I think if you're framing the game in reference to like how it used to play, you would think that that like slows the game down. The game is significantly quicker because of this. In the and when I say slow the game down, I mean like the actual interaction component of like interacting with your opponent on the map. Like because you start off the board, you would think that you like don't interact with your opponent in turn 2 or 3, but because you're playing battle lines every game, you're interacting with your opponent on turn 1 pretty pretty regularly. um, yeah,
Yeah, and the moves are also farther. This is a random change that I think a lot of people didn't catch.
it's feels a little silly to do too, to be honest with you. So yeah, the when you move a unit now, only you only have to touch the movement tool as opposed to like notch the base into the movement tool, which means you can have the tip or the prong of the movement tool like touching your unit's base, but that's the only thing that's touching it, which effectively means that gone are the days of not being able to close a range band if your opponent is exactly, if your opponent is exactly 3 away, you used to be able to not be able to move and shoot them at range 2. That is no longer true. I haven't done the exact measurement to see how much farther that gets you. I think the way that the tool works now is you actually get a little bit more than a range band, probably.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit. I mean it's probably like an extra, somewhere between a 16th and an eighth of an inch.
Yeah. And it was pretty hairline
It
close
was it was very
as
slightly short of a range band previously.
yeah, so I suspect that you probably can get a little bit farther than an entire range band in a move now. And obviously we're talking about a speed 2 move, but this goes for speed 1 and speed 3 moves too. It just
Yeah.
those are a little bit less impactful of a change. So I mean, at the end of the day, I'm like okay with that change in that it sort of makes sense that a speed 2 move closes a range band. That's always been kind of a weird thing, particularly for new players to kind of get their heads around, I think, when coming to Legion. So
Yep.
I don't hate it. It does look weird when you're
It looks weird when
performing the
you do it.
moves on
Yeah.
the table. This goes in my. I really wish that they just like did a new essentials pack so that we could have movement tools that
That are
work the way that
slightly
they were
longer.
supposed
Yeah.
to. Um,
Yeah, it feels just kind of like sloppy to me.
yeah, it's like um
I mean, this is such a minor thing to quibble about, but
it is, but it's one of those things where, I know that they said that this is not a new edition. It is a new game though, guys. But if you're gonna go to all this work to do that sort of thing, I, I just wish that it didn't feel messy still. It still feels like we're kind of stitching together old and new rules a little bit. And it's just kind of like making it messier than it should. Like if you're gonna make a new game, which is what they did, they should have just ripped the band-aid off.
Yeah, it's fair.
So,
What's your take, having played the missions, on how this kind of plays out?
I hope everybody likes Intercept the Transmissions because so I have a couple thoughts on this after playing a few games. I could see some of these thoughts changing, so please take this with a grain of salt. This is just how my games have gone, and perhaps not indicative of the larger whole. But um, I would say that the majority of these objectives feel the same in that you are just moving to the center of the table and trying to hold your ground. All of these objectives, I'm pretty sure all of these objectives start scoring on turn 2
They do.
and score every turn as if it was key positions turn 6, but every turn of the game. Um, Maybe this is a good place to talk about the fact that if you at any point reach 12 victory points at the end of a turn, you win the game and the game is over. So if you are dramatically ahead of your opponent on victory points, you can literally my game today that I played right before this cast, I finished on turn 3 and the game was it was not a concession. It was nothing. Like the game was over because I scored 12 victory points, and Legion now ends when someone scores 12 victory points.
So even if like
So
most of your stuff is dead or whatever, there's no chance for your opponent to come back and
the
dominate
game is
the
the game
remaining
is
two
just
scoring
over.
turns. Yeah.
Yes, the game is just over. Um, I'm gonna be honest. Topically, I'm not sure what happens if you're like at 11 and then you get tabled.
I
That
think
may be in the
if you
rule
get
book.
tabled,
That
you
may be in the
automatically
rule
lose.
book somewhere. Yeah,
It,
I
it
don't actually
I
know what
recall
happens in that circumstance.
Yeah, I recall
Um,
seeing that when I went through, and I should mention I wrote an article. It's out on our blog if you want to check it out and see all this in written form. But yeah, as I was going through the rules and trying to suss out all the changes, I did see something about basically how you just win automatically if at some point you have units and your opponent doesn't.
okay.
So
Um, so I guess to go back to the original question of like how these play out, thus far, it has felt like the objectives do not matter. um, I'm saying this to be honest. I'm not happy about it.
well, hang
But
on. So I want to flesh this out a little bit because you just said that you won on victory points on turn 3.
I did, but yes. So let me it was almost like a side effect. It was just
It,
like I was killing my opponent so hard that I also just happened to win on victory points. Because and let me describe that a little bit more in detail because I understand how that could come across as confusing. Because everything is area control.
uh-huh.
At the end of the day, the person with more units just is going to control the area points.
Right.
Is really how this
Which makes it
comes,
all about killing stuff.
which makes it all about killing stuff.
Yeah.
There is no situation where you can take your point of interest and run away with your one unit and kind of rogue one it to like save the day. That doesn't exist anymore. So once you start losing, if you are unable to bring your opponent back to parity as far as firepower, it is very difficult to actually get back into the game.
To feel snowbally.
He's very much so. Very much so. Yeah, for a variety of reasons. I would not say that the objectives really has anything to do with that. That's got more to do with the other changes we're going to talk about today. Um, but
Well,
it
the
de-
objectives force you into each other,
the
so
objectives
they do sort of
definitely
have something to do with
force
that.
force you to play to the center of the table. Um, but I almost feel at this point that like you would probably one person is going to play to the center of the table no matter what, even if the objectives were not there, because it is so easy to kill things.
Okay, why is that?
Okay, so it is a
And then we can go back and talk about secondaries and
yeah.
advantages and stuff.
It is a kind of like a combination of, I would say, uh three dominant things.
Okay.
The first, you're playing on battle lines and basically in all of these deployment zones, which means under the old rules, you're distance 4 away from your opponent when you start.
Yep.
So let's assume for a second that everybody has no units with special deployment keywords. When you move on to the table, assuming you're in a straight line, you're going to be roughly range 4 away from your opponent's units, which would be like deploying in the old, like old school Legion.
Right.
But you still have to do a second thing, and often that second thing is like moving up so that you're even closer, so that you can like contest some points, or
Right.
you're just sitting there like dodging and not doing anything with your activation, which means that your unit only gets eight more actions this game. So it's important to note that your actions are much more important, particularly your early game actions, because many of your units are only going to take somewhere between 4 and 6 actions. So you really got to be putting them where they need to go. So you're going to be roughly somewhere between like range 4 and range 3 of your opponent, assuming you don't have any deployment keywords. However, most people are going to have deployment keywords, which means you are going to be far closer to that to your opponent. Units with scout and range 3 guns can pretty much shoot the table, because scout allows you to take your scout move as you deploy. So you basically get to move twice and shoot on turn 1 is really what it boils down to. Which means you have an effective range of 5 from your table edge if you have scout 2. Which means that anything that has moved out of the battle lines deployment zone of your opponent is fair game. If you have a deployment keyword that is infiltrate, prepared positions, scout 3, transport, you can actually shoot the table with a range 3 unit on turn 1. What this fundamentally means is that when you deploy something onto the table and your opponent has anything with those keywords on it, it is going to be under threat, which means that you have to actually engage your opponent immediately, because you can't just like deploy a unit and let it get eaten for free.
Which is also relevant because since you don't deploy all your units at once, you might only have like 1 or 2 units on the table when this is happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it creates this really weird dynamic where like you're deploying units, immediately engage in shooting, and like in all of my games so far, like I'm not sure every unit has survived turn 1. I like they're like we've lost activations on turn 1 with regularity.
And previously losing any activation on turn 1 was like a coup. Basically, that means like
Losing an
it was
activation
really
before
rare.
turn 3 is a coup,
Yeah.
right? And I would say in the game that I played today, both of us lost half our army by the start of turn 3. And this brings me to perhaps the most important point, that is maybe not the most important, but thing that makes the game like significantly more dicey, in that I forgot what the grand point I was trying to make here was, but cover. The answer is cover.
The grand point was just everything dies.
Yes, everything's dying, but cover doesn't. I'm hesitant to say that cover doesn't matter, but you have to play like it doesn't matter, is really what it boils down to. Um, there are a lot of units that have sharpshooter and blasts, which I guess kind of don't change. Like, they took away your cover before, but it feels worse now for some
They
reason.
usually didn't take away all of it though. I mean,
Yeah.
blast did, but blast was typically on weapons that were very short range. And previously, short range weapons were like super powerful because they were hard to get close enough to do things with consistently.
Hey everybody, Jay here from the 5th Trooper. I'm very excited to talk to you today about my team up with Game Toppers in our latest Kickstarter. Well, the quality of Game Toppers is off the chart. They're known for their quality throughout the board game industry. So we're going to take my amazing designs, we're going to put them on amazing mats, and we're going to make them available in all different sizes. We're talking high fidelity prints. You're going to be able to see the design details, and it's going to be off the chart. Double stitch edging, which means they don't fray or tear or warp. And then also they're going to be this thicker neoprene, about 3 millimeters, which makes them so much easier to roll up, to store, because they're not going to crack. So I'm super excited about this. I hope you join us on our Kickstarter, and we'll see you out there.
The way cover works now is that it's I've heard people refer to it as a ward save, but effectively it is an additional armor save you get to make based on the degree of cover you're in.
Yeah, that's 40K terminology, but yeah,
Yeah.
you roll a whole nother set of blocks, or you roll a whole nother set of defense dice uh, in between when your opponent makes an attack roll and when you actually roll your saves. And those defense dice are white, and it is block for light cover and block and surge for heavy cover. So basically either 1 in 6 or 1 in 3 chance to actually generate a save, which has the effect. So I've heard people being like, well, it's great, it scales with the attack pool size now, which is mathematically true, but you also have to, well, so
I really disagree with that assessment.
okay.
I've heard that said on that cover scales with the amount of dice being thrown, and like that's like I don't even know how to say that. Like, to deal with the way in which that statement is wrong. In that it's you can't say that it scales until you actually know the outcome of the dice. Fundamentally,
It doesn't scale with the attack pool, it scales with the hits that you roll. Is that a because that is
but I would make the argument that it's like, yes, the law of averages is like saying that cover scales is like saying that you get 1 block if your opponent rolls 3 dice, and you get 2 blocks if your opponent rolls 6 dice, and you get 3 blocks if your opponent rolls 9 dice.
Sure,
Right? But that's not what happens.
no, it's not. And what I mean by it scales is simply that the more hits your opponent rolls, the more defense dice you roll for purposes of cover.
Yes.
So it literally scales in that you roll more dice if your opponent rolls more hits. But as far as the benefit scaling is concerned, um, especially with white dice, that is such a crapshoot
It's
that like
the amount of times today, and obviously this is like one of those situations where it's a variable thing. Like, sometimes it's going to happen, sometimes it's not, but there's supposed to be like a law of averages, right? But when your opponent throws a fives Z6, like 15 die pool or whatever it is now into you, and we can talk about that in the GAR update.
Yeah.
and you roll 0 for 8 on your cover saves, and then you go to make your armor save, you're like, well, as opposed to 2 just being off the top guaranteed, and like you have a chance for the unit to like survive, the unit's just dead.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and besides being much more of a slot machine now, it's actually just objectively worse most of the time because if you think about it, if you even just say you just always roll the average result, right? And just take the variance out of it, that means that you have to get to 6 hits before you actually reach the previous cover benefit.
yes.
And maybe it's different a little bit now with like potential double core sizes, although I don't think people would be doing that as much as I've seen people speculate because I'm not actually sure that's good
I have thoughts
most
about
of the
that. I've
time.
done it.
Okay. But I guess my point is like 95% of the dice pools in Legion historically do not even come close to 6 hits previously and still don't. So even if you say that, like, okay, let's take the variance out of it for a second and just try and compare it to the previous cover benefit, it's worse. It's straight up worse, even if
and
you take out the variance.
and I also want to like talk about this. Like, let's talk about a situation where this came up today, and it felt like pretty horrible on my end. So Cassian was shooting me with his
Uh-huh.
pistol,
Yep.
and my opponent rolled like 2 crits and a hit. Right. Normally, the 2 crits would go through, and that's it
Right.
because you've got cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now the hit goes through like most of the time,
Yeah.
right? So and because crits in the pool kind of additionally skew this in that, like, yes, there are like 7 damage coming through, but you only get to roll cover saves against 4, so it really turns like 7 down to 6 maybe, and it's just like
Yeah.
all of this is to say that the game is far more lethal.
Yeah. Which is something they said they were trying to achieve when they talked about the changes.
They definitely achieved that goal.
Yeah. I know that. So we've gone through an evolution in this game with cover, right? You had original RG rules where the cover benefit was extremely useful, but there was a lot of player agency over whether your units and your targets actually got that cover.
Yep.
Then we had the CRB update where cover was still extremely useful and beneficial, but they kind of removed most of that player agency over whether your target had cover or not. And now we're in a world where like you're still in that, limited player agency to determine whether your target has cover or not, but also cover basically just doesn't matter. So this feels like the worst of both worlds to me.
I mean, it
But
feels really great when you spike a cover roll.
yeah, when you just randomly roll 3 blocks or something.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, take that, Pierce shot, and you're like, you're on cloud 9. But it also feels pretty terrible as your opponent to like, roll like a 7-hit pool at them, and like they spike a cover save, and all of a sudden they're like rolling one regular save. That doesn't feel good either. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
It's just it's both significantly more variance and just generally on average cover is much less useful.
yes, I will say at the end of the day, it results in, like you said, just you cannot rely on outcomes the way that you used to be able to, which has some ramifications across the game. But yeah. So anywho, I
It's
guess
very 40K.
yes, for sure.
Saying this is somebody that quit 40K to play Legion.
Now, now.
I don't mean that as a compliment.
Now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, anyways, I think that's a very, very long-winded way of saying that I think that because of those reasons, and the lethality of the game, objectives are not going to mean what you're used to them meaning. That is my fear. I don't know if that will bear out, but that is definitely my initial take on how my games have played out so far.
Yeah, I've been getting the same vibe from other people that have played already. So
I mean, and part of this is that like I do think that this feeling will probably be scaled back to some degree as we learn ways in which to preserve our units from being shot off the table on round one. There may be some community consensus that like more terrain, line of sight blocking terrain has to hit the table for games to work the way that they should or whatever. We definitely have, because this is a new game, the amount of terrain that is potentially required may be different. And I have a strong suspicion that the answer to that is yes, unless the game is supposed to be over on turn 3.
I mean, I've also seen most people trying to figure out how to tech towards doing as much alpha strike as possible, which also feels very 40k to me. But everybody's like, all right, how can I get more scout? How can I get more infiltrate into my list? How can I get more
Don't give
ways to
away
just
the
get my
secrets we
units?
talked about today, Kyle.
I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I guess my point is I'm already seeing, we're only 3 days in, and people just prioritizing as much alpha strike, as much early turn 1 damage as possible. And that, to me, that tells me that they're reaching the same conclusions that you are, which is that the objectives are secondary to just murdering everything.
It feels like everyone's just playing Rexstar.
Yeah. Which, for those that live through the Rexstar meta, I don't know.
In,
You guys
in
can judge for
more
yourself
in
whether that
more
sounds
ways
fun or
than
not.
one, because standby sharing's back in a bad
Yeah.
way.
Well, free standbys are back at least.
Yes, which are better than shared standbys.
Yeah, they
just
are
so we're
better than
clear.
shared standbys because you can get more of them and they happen on a better timing window. All right. I want to talk about secondaries, but first, we need to do a plug.
Yeah.
Uh, the Kickstarter for the terrain packs and everything that we talked about with Jay is live. So you can find that probably in not the comments, but the thing that's above the comments, the show description. I'm sure you can find a link for that. There will also be a runner at the start of this podcast reminding you about that. But go check out the Kickstarter for all that awesome stuff that Jay talked about last time. So, all right, should we talk about secondary objectives? Because look, I am mixed on the primaries, mostly based on how homogenous they feel. This feels like really cool design space to me. So, let's talk about the secondaries.
You're gonna hate what I have to say.
Okay.
I agree. So I do want to take a step back. And
Okay.
I think that this turn 0 setup for everything is better than what we had. The process is better.
Okay. I'm gonna wait till I try it, but
The
I really
options,
liked the flops, so
I understand.
yeah.
There's still a flop here, and I think that that's
Sort of.
important.
Yeah.
I promise that it does not feel that different.
Okay.
However, similarly to the primary objectives, the secondary objectives, I think, suffer from a similar fate, in that you kind of do these things as a result of killing your opponent anyways.
Yeah. And honestly, after reading these ones, and this is why I think it's cool design space.
Yeah.
But when I wrote that article on Friday, I read these and I'm like, these are all just things that you're going to end up doing anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, and that's been your experience so far?
Oh yeah. It's just like these have all been afterthoughts and like, oh, I'm like, I actually have 3 more victory points than I thought I did because I just like did those things without trying to achieve them because
Yeah.
they were the things that were gonna let me win the game anyways. So, yeah, I, I think I agree with you. I think both the primary objectives and the secondary objectives have there's insane space to play with and work with here. My hope is that since they're not giving us physical product for any of these cards, maybe the reason for that is that we don't have them all yet. I wish that they would have told us that. Um, but that's my hope. My hope is that there are like 20 more of each of these
Which
somewhere.
are different and force you to do things that you're not already doing,
Yes.
or at least
Um,
incentivize you to do things that you're not already doing.
yeah. Like at least half of these secondary objectives might as well just say shoot your opponent's units.
I think 5 of them basically do. I
Yeah.
think there's
Yeah. Um,
you're right. No, there's one that involves having units in a specific location. The scanner one.
yeah, and the
Actually, there's 2 like that, but the
yeah,
other 4 are all just kill stuff in various ways.
yeah. I mean, and I think the bomb one is also similar. The bomb one is just very similar to the primary objectives, where it's just like get the thing to the location and it
Although
does the thing.
notably, this is a situation where you actually have player agency over where the thing goes.
Yes.
I think the only one, possibly.
Mm,
Is this the only
I
situation where a player places a point of interest at a not predetermined location?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I mean, there are definitely things that can happen here. The reason that I hit 12 victory points on turn 3 in the game that I played today is because we were playing sweep and clear, and I
And,
I, I killed a couple of units.
and you got 5 victory points from sweep and clear.
I got 4, but
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
it's just like, yep, Anakin's in your deployment zone. He killed a unit, so I guess I get 2 victory points. Like, um, which is a thing that's going to happen a lot. Everybody,
Yeah, I'm I know I sound a little subdued on some of these. I'm very excited about Anakin. And we don't have to talk about Anakin today, but he looks like the
he's
Anakin
busted.
I
He's
wish
he's
that he
he's
was.
super busted. I again, we're playing a whole new game, so I'm kind of trying to withhold judgment on points costs, but some of this stuff feels like it is radically not even, not even on the board as far as being accurate into what they should cost, Anakin included. Uh, the fact that Anakin costs more than or costs like 20 points less than Operative Luke is is
Yeah.
insane.
Well, maybe operative Luke is in that part too, because he did not get a new unit card. So
That's fair. Yeah. Anywho, so
yeah, no, Anakin looks silly to me. But we'll
that's
talk
that's
about that
that's
more
good
next
to
week.
use. Good to use.
In ways that are cool. Maybe they just need to like turn it down a little bit. He's not a token. He's not a token farm anymore.
No,
We're
no.
gonna talk about it next week.
He's a burger bot. Let's move on.
That's yeah. Okay. Advantages.
Yeah, advantages are pretty. I think of all of the things on turn 0 so far that I felt like have really made an effect, these actually they're the most interesting part of turn 0 because they're actually things that like change from game to game. In the other 2 things right now are just like, yep, you're killing each other, and these are like doing things that at least kind of change how killing each other feels. um
It's also, I think, the only way that you can guarantee that a card that you're bringing is one that you will actually use.
yes, so each player, rather, so the primary objectives and secondary objectives, you both are kind of fighting over which from using your own decks to like
Uh,
replace um
Well, so
each
yeah, I
other's.
guess we should talk about this, right, in a little
Yeah,
more detail.
sure.
So basically, the veto flop thing are gone, bids are gone. Blue player is randomly determined. It's you roll like 5 black dice or something, and
You
whoever
roll
gets more
five. You each
results.
roll 5 black dice.
Yeah.
Whoever rolls more crits is blue player. Starts as blue player. If you both roll the same amount of crits, it's hits and so on.
Is this like, I'd be curious to have a statistician tell me if this is like significantly different than just rolling a red dice on 50-50.
I mean the chances is just as likely. I think it's the same because you're
Right.
rolling
It
the
seems like
same dice.
a glorified 4-up, basically,
Yeah,
on a D6. Yeah.
whatever.
Anyway, whatever. But so, and then whoever wins gets to decide whether they want to be blue or not. Or no, whoever
No,
wins
no,
is
no, no.
blue.
Whoever wins is blue.
And then they decide whether they're bringing their objectives, primaries, or their secondaries. And then the other opponent,
Kind of.
yeah,
So
okay,
the blue player gets to choose to flip the top card of their primary objective deck or their secondary objective deck.
okay,
Okay. They basically you're going to bring 3 primary objectives, 3 secondary objectives, and 3 advantages.
okay,
You're going to shuffle them into separate decks of each of those things.
yep,
And the blue player is going to be like, okay, I would like to use one of my primary objectives, and they will pull a primary objective at random and place it into the turn 0 game space. And then which they could also have chosen secondary objective, and they would
right.
have done the same thing with their secondary. The red player at that time will flip whatever the blue player did not choose. And then both players will flip an advantage into play. So
I see.
there will be a shared primary from the one of the players, a shared secondary from the other player, and then each person will have a
Has
random
their own
advantage from their
advantage.
deck.
Got it.
Once that happens, starting with the blue player can either discard the primary objective and replace it with a primary objective from their deck, discard a secondary objective and replace it with a secondary from their deck, discard their advantage that they presently have face up and replace it with one of the from their deck, force their opponent to discard their advantage and they'll replace it from their deck. I think that's the extent of the things that the blue player can do. The red player can do all of those things. Plus, they can choose to take blue player.
Is there any advantage to actually like taking blue player after the things start?
Yes, because the blue player gets to decide what side of the table they get after this entire process.
Okay, relevant.
Yes. So blue player might as well just say you get table side, as in addition to like all of the effects during the game that are like broken by blue player ties, like command card timing and stuff like that.
Yep.
Which is like
Table side is way more
it-
relevant.
it's definitely way more tangible in
Yeah.
the bare minimum.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say about it except that right now.
Yeah. So to kind of go back to advantages, the advantages are actually like have like some pretty unique effects. I think strafing run and ordnance are pretty bad though thus far. I they seem like they could have mattered if everything just didn't die the whole game.
It seems like they matter in a situation where scoring is more relevant.
Yes, and maybe we're able to like figure this out to the point where it like you can keep your stuff alive, and that does happen. I don't know, but right now where it just seems like everything's shot off the table by turn 3, strafing run and ordnance seem kind of bad, but the other 4 are actually kind of interesting. Garrison basically gives a unit in sort of infiltrate prepared position, which allows your unit to basically start the game on the game board as long as it's in your zone, and it's a core unit, basically a unit that like ordinarily wouldn't have happened like have that, which means that it'll probably give a unit that is not normally like able to engage on turn 1 the ability to do so.
Also potentially kind of a liability because you've got a unit sitting out there that your opponent can attack.
100%.
Yeah.
Generally best if you've gotten a line of sight blocker or something to hide them
Yeah.
behind, right? And then advanced intel, at the start of the first activation phase, you had a pass token to your pass pool. This is a good time to talk about how passing has changed. It is
Yeah.
it is pretty it's a pretty big change in how the game flows. Passing is only checked at the start of a turn, or the ability to pass. And you are granted a number of pass tokens based on effects that give you pass tokens at the start of the turn. And so, as opposed to in Legion as we knew it, if you like went down on activations like during the turn, you could conceivably, the game state in which you could pass or not pass could change, right? But if you at the start of a turn you don't have pass tokens and you get a bunch of units that are like get eaten, you can get really screwed.
Although you
Because
can pass if you draw a token that is dead, right? I feel like I read that in the pass rule.
I don't know. If you can, that's news to me, and it's just something I've missed, which is possible. Um,
But the
but
point is, it's not just one pass anymore. It's potentially a lot of passes if there's a big activation differential.
it is the differential -1.
Right.
So if your opponent is 11 and you're at 10, you get no passes. But if you're at 11 and they're at 8, they would get 2 passes because 3 minus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so advanced intel gives you an additional pass token, which is really interesting, particularly when you're like at parity on activations and all of
That
this.
seems like the obviously best advantage in this set of 6 advantages.
I think cunning deployment is pretty good too.
That's the free dodge token one.
Dodge tokens are significantly better at this point because you roll cover and then you get to spend your dodge tokens.
And it's still a
Um,
flat hit off, which cover is not anymore.
and is
So
still
anything where you're taking flat hits off the top is
well, and this is flat hits off the top after you kind of get like a free roll,
right.
because you might not actually need the dodge token, right? Um,
Oh yeah. So you can pass if you draw an odor token with a rank that does not have any corresponding friendly units on the battlefield.
oh, okay, cool. I didn't catch that, so that's good to know.
So yeah, it's not quite like if you draw a token for a dead unit. It's if you draw a token and all your remaining units of that type are dead, then you can pass.
And so that conceivably would allow you to pass multiple times per turn if that happened multiple times.
Yes, you also cannot pass twice in a row.
Ooh, okay.
Sorry, it looks like you can potentially pass twice in a row if you pass via drawing a token for a bunch of dead units. You may not spend a pass token if you passed in the previous turn.
Yeah, there are just so many changes that it's like every time we go through something like I find out something new, right?
Thank God there is at least blue text in here.
Some of it is not
Some of it's
really
not.
actually blue
Yeah,
text, and it is
it's
changes.
sort of like the heading is blue, but the actual body of the text is not necessarily blue.
Yeah,
And yeah, so it was when I was writing this article looking for, I'm sure I only caught like 60% of the changes, but
it's not a new edition, guys. And then the last one we got in here is fortified positions, which is basically fortified positions. So
yeah, except it's 3 barricades instead of 6
8
or 8. Yeah,
yeah.
shows you how much I always disliked including that objective. So
Yeah, it was a pain in the butt to hold barricades around. Anywho, I think that there's a lot of cool stuff that they could do with these turn zero card situation setups. They just
they didn't,
they
or they haven't yet.
they haven't yet. They chose not to. I don't know. They didn't really go into whether we should expect more of these or not. I'm really hoping that this is not like OG Legion, and we're stuck with for 2 years with these because this is what I can say is that this is significantly less configurations that are actually different from each other than even just what was in the core box for original Legion. That I feel confident in saying.
Yeah, I mean, besides the fact that it's all basically intercept and battle lines, the fact that you can't get different combinations of deployments and objectives is just significantly decreases your possible permutations.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Which certainly simplifies it, no
it
doubt.
does.
Uh,
I loved turn zero, Mike. So
I know you did, and I think that this really has the option to surpass what we had before, as long as it's like they struck gold, but like decided not to dig. Is how I feel about this
okay,
system so
that's
far.
fair. There's definitely a lot of potential design space in a situation like this. I'd love to see like faction specific advantages or
Yeah,
something like that.
100%. You could have faction specific secondaries.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of
I
stuff
guess you could
that,
have faction specific missions,
yes,
right?
absolutely, right? You
Yeah.
could have asymmetric missions in this setup.
I'd love to see more missions where there's a little more player agency over what you're actually doing,
Yeah,
whether it's placing the tokens or what. But
I think one of the things that wish they had kind of really emphasized with these is like making it feel a little bit more like Star Wars. Like, I don't know. This just feels like a lot of like take and hold things, and Star Wars is just that's not really what Star Wars is, I guess. I don't know. I guess Clone Wars is kind of
Clone
like
Wars a
that,
little more. But yeah, the
but
Galactic
like,
Civil War
you know
is
what Recover the Supplies was cool because it was like you're like stealing the stuff and running away, like
right.
that's what Star Wars feels like. You're like stealing the plans and getting out, and I think objectives like hostage exchange and like you could do a payload situation very similar to like what we had before with this sort of thing, and I think it would be really interesting and cool. And I
And payload was one of the OG objectives that was always very good at making sure that players were kind of like forced to interact with each other. If that's one of their goals of this,
yeah,
there are ways to do that without just making a bunch of area control objectives.
totally,
So
so in any case, I think there's a lot of room to grow here. My hope is
yeah,
that that's what they've chosen to do. Hard to say, I think, at the structure.
yep. Right now it feels just very 40K.
Um, so what do you want to get into as far as changes go beyond the turn zero changes, which are obviously like pretty fundamental.
Well, we talked about cover. I think we should probably talk about the points increase.
Oh, that other fundamental thing that happens before the game starts,
Yeah.
the fact that lists have 25% more points in them. It's really more than that if we're talking in terms of old Legion, because a lot of things have gotten cheaper in
Yeah.
addition to the points cap going up. Some things have got more expensive, but overall, I think things are generally cheaper, I would say.
I think the only thing consistently that I saw that got more expensive was sniper rifles.
Sniper rifles across the board seem. I haven't actually
I
taken
think
the
they all
time
went
to
up
do
by
the
10
math.
points.
They're like 10 points ish, which with the new cover changes,
Makes sense.
I,
I think it
I
might.
don't hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're
Um,
just you're picking up 1 to 2 models now every time with a sniper shot.
pretty much. 'Cause,
And strike teams are detachments now, and detachments do not count against force orgs. So that means that like anybody can take 6 snipers just in the special forces slot, and 5 of us can take 8.
no,
Um,
it's very expensive to do that.
it is very expensive. I'm not actually convinced it's good, but it
I'm
is a thing that
also
you can do.
I'm also, I think, convinced that there is a better configuration for full arcs than taking that sniper rifle.
Yes, I agree with that, which we will talk about not today.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so 1,000 points. I mean,
I mean,
this was the change that was like extremely heavily rumored slash previewed in advance that we actually kind of vaguely talked about already.
yeah.
Um, certainly it is based with all the other changes. It does not appear to make the game longer because everything dies immediately. One and two, they made the game shorter, like actually shorter in terms of turns. So at least that part of it is not a downside. I mean, having played the games, what would you say are your thoughts on just playing with 1,000 points instead of 800?
I have very mixed feelings on this at the moment.
Okay,
The reason for that is I like the idea of it. I have always liked the idea of increasing the amount of points in a Legion game because I always have felt like we were just on the cusp of being able to like take cool stuff in our lists, and we like it. It always, every time you made an 800 point list, it always felt very constricted and limited in what you were able to actually put in the list.
which I think was intentional in
I
that
think it
it
was.
forced you to make hard choices, basically,
It definitely did.
and go in
Um,
specific directions.
yes. I suspect that that will still be true because as any competitive game kind of evolves and people figure it out and things will just get tighter, right? That's just a part of figuring out the calculus of how a
Yep.
game works. I think what I don't like about it right now is that I put like 90 models on the table the other day. Um,
That's a lot of models.
Half of them were off the table by the end of it, but midway through turn two. And that did not feel good, and it felt very normal. And it has felt very normal throughout all of my games, is that rather than you putting these cool painted models that you put together and converted and painted and they like stay on the table for 5 or 6 turns, you're lucky if they get to turn three.
You're putting them on the table to pick them back up again.
Yeah, that's really how it feels. Um,
Again, very 40K.
yes, yeah. And uh, yeah, I'm not I'm not loving that aspect of it right now. It does not make me feel good about playing the game when I am, putting down these, all these cool arcs in my 501st Legion, and you're just picking them right back up very quickly. Maybe I'm just like bad at this version of Legion right now. I don't know. But part of this is going to be really learning it, but at least in the short term, it feels very much like you kind of have to commit to the bit, and there's a lot of trading going on. Um, so uh, all of that to say is that I can sort of take or leave the 1,000 point increase at this point. I guess it would be worse if we were only at 800 points and stuff was being removed with the same frequency.
Well, you'd have less stuff sooner, I guess, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you'd also have 200 points less of stuff that you paid for and painted that basically doesn't matter.
yeah. So, so I don't know. That's where
But
I'm at right now.
yeah, you want your units to do stuff when they're on the table, at least a little bit,
Like,
right?
I just my opponent put an AA5 on the table. Anakin one shot it at the top of turn two. There's nothing he could do about it. It was like that outcome was I got a like probably in the 80% plus range as far as dice go. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Well,
yeah.
1,000 points doesn't stick around as much anyway. So, all
Yep. Yep.
right. Related, you can now double the size of your core. Double is not quite accurate because it's not always true, but roughly you can generally increase the squad of your core units by usually double, sometimes slightly less than double.
No, no,
So,
no, 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 no. You got that backwards. It is almost always the size of the base unit plus one.
uh, which which I guess accounts for if you're putting like a heavy in there, then it becomes double.
Yes.
But
Uh,
Ewoks are 4 instead of 6, so that's actually less.
are they really?
Yeah, I was looking at this today because I was making Ewok lists because reasons. Because low profile is one of the few things that still cancels hits
Low profile is really
reliably.
good.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the only thing besides dodge tokens and barrier that actually just flat gives you results.
It is
So
interesting that there are still things in the games that do that do not scale. Um, even though that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess you're right. Ewoks are only 4, which is
yeah.
weird. It just in contrast to what basically all the other units are, which
Most of
seem to
them
be the base
is
unit plus
base
one.
unit plus 1. Yeah,
Yeah.
which means that if you give them a heavy, you end up with a double size core unit.
Yes.
Yeah, this feels like a other than the answer being to sell more miniatures. This feels like kind of a why to me. Like, what's the benefit of a change like this? I mean, it gives you something else to spend points on without upping your activation count, I suppose. But I don't know.
I
What are your thoughts on this?
genuinely yeah, so I tried to do the like I'm gonna take 90 B1s thing.
Uh,
And uh I, it didn't feel good from like I don't think it was a good investment of my points. I definitely think that you definitely shouldn't do it unless you're maxed on core units. Um
yeah, it's notable that in I think every case they also gain Indomitable, which makes sense in that I guess you're essentially combining two separate targets into one target for your opponent to suppress. But also, based on the timing of how panic and suppression and scoring works, it's not like you get to make a rally save before scoring.
yeah.
So, and
My
it doesn't increase their courage. So,
No, my experience so far has basically been that like doubling the size of your core units just makes them harder to hide.
yeah.
Um, and also like it just because of how the new cover system works, there's no real advantage to doing this outside of like putting extra bodies on the table. Like if you take a bunch of clones in a regular unit and a bunch of clones in a double unit, like if you take two separate clone units with no heavies and compare it to a unit that's got, you know, two squads worth of clones in it, like the offensive output is basically the same. The defensive output is basically the same. So what you've really done is you've lost a scoring unit.
Right.
Um, and you can't take two heavies, which upon having tried this a few times, I think is actually a big deal because the heavies are often still the things that are outputting the most dice or the most hits into that actually like force saves.
And you're also creating a situation where your opponent is less likely to have like wasted wounds when they're targeting your units too, right? Like if take your two clone units for an example, you've got two separate 4-man units if you're just taking them naked. In one of those situations, if your opponent does 5 wounds, they're wasting a wound,
Yes.
right? In the other situation, if they do 5 wounds, they're doing 5 wounds.
Yep. Yeah.
So, and I don't know that's kind of an extreme example, but it's, suppose one of those units has been shot, right? Then you got two scoring units, one of which has one model in it and one of which has 4 models in it. Your opponent has to direct at least 2 separate attacks to bring you down to 0 score units there.
Yes.
Whereas if you have one 5-man squad at that point, they can potentially just attack it once, and then you have 0 scoring units. So
Yeah.
yeah, I get what you're saying, and I was skeptical on whether this would be a good idea too when I saw it. I mean, it does make it so that you can have a stronger attack within the space of one activation instead of spreading it out over 2 activations.
I think there is
That seems like the
one
only reason to do it to me.
I think there is one scenario where this makes sense. I think maybe two, because I haven't played enough Ewoks to know. But the Geonosian regular guys are just better than the heavy weapon.
Yeah.
So adding a bunch of Geonosians to the squad actually significantly increases its offensive output.
I think that's
Uh,
true of Ewoks too.
yeah. Um,
But those are, I think, the only 2 cases where that's true.
yes. So I think in Geonosians, like I think I could see Geonosians being like, yeah, we're just taking nine-man core units
Yeah.
and with no heavies and stuff, and being like, well, this unit rolls 18 dice, so have fun with that, and just taking 6 of them, like 6 doubled units,
Right.
which unfortunately is twice as many Geonosians that I own, and I'm not sure I'm gonna throw
Yeah.
bad money after bad money. So
Yeah, I sadly also own 6 Geonosian units,
yeah,
and I'm not buying 6 more of them.
no, no. So yeah, I don't know what this is. This feels very unnecessary, unneeded, and I think there are going to be some people that are baited into buying extra core boxes when they really shouldn't. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna buy some of the new stuff just because the resculpts are great looking.
sure.
But I'm not gonna buy them because I want to field more rebel troopers than I have already.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Um, okay. I'm scrolling through some of these. I mean, there are like smaller rules changes that we should probably just do like another completely separate episode on all the various random smaller rules changes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Basically, kind of like going through and being like, this is what changed in the RRG. Newsflash, the answer is everything.
Yep. The one other thing that is like an actual new rule is that we should talk about before we quickly get to the roadmap is backup.
Yeah, backup. Yes, we should talk about it. Okay, so
What
backup.
is it, Mike? Let's
Yeah,
start with
yeah, yeah.
that.
So backup is a condition that your commanders and operatives can have if there is a requisite unsuppressed friendly unit of a certain type. Generally, it is a core unit, though some units can use like their retinue options. So, like for instance, Sabine could have Clan Ren provide her backup, or Emperor Palpatine could have Royal Guard provide him backup.
Well,
And
that's entourage, which is different.
I'm pretty
Retinue.
sure you can get backup from Entourage and Retinue.
Okay. Maybe both of those work. I don't know. But yeah,
Yes, I'm
the
I'm
point is there are
I'm
other ways to get backup besides just having a core unit.
Yes, I'm generally like if there's like if you have retinue or entourage, the things that you are retinuing or entouraging also provide
Okay.
the unit that is got the entourage or retinue keyword backup. And what backup does is that I believe as long as that unit is at range 1 of the unit that they are like providing backup to and are unsuppressed, and whatever is shooting the commander or operative is beyond range 2, it shaves 2 hits off the top of an attack. So it's like old heavy cover. And it's kind of like, so backup's like sort of like Guardian, except the unit doesn't
Except
have to
it's
like
free.
roll
Yeah.
saves. And notably, it's in addition to Guardian. Um, I haven't found that this keyword really matters at all. And I don't, yeah.
Just
But
because you don't want to shoot the character anyway, because the pools are so big that the 2 hits are like whatever.
no, because
Like
you're
why?
already at range 2 of the character
Oh
before
yeah, okay, right.
you're just like so I don't know if this is here to like stop sniper shots and stuff, which is weird because the snipers that they're now printing will ignore backup anyways. Because they're all like amband rifle.
Oh, you're
Uh,
talking about the new type of
the new
sniper rifles.
marksmans and
Yeah, yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So like I don't really know what this is trying to do other than like they said in the panel that they put this in because they've characters got wasted too quickly. And in fairness, they probably did, but they still do.
Because you're just so close that it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, what I will say is that if you're taking like range 3 shots with like core unit violence, you're gonna shoot their things that don't have backup because you actually want to do maximum damage
Yeah, you're
efficiency,
waste
right?
you're throwing hits into the void basically
Yeah.
if you're triggering backup.
But at the end of the day, you probably still have to kill Darth Vader to win the game. So
Yeah. Seems like this helps sort of like impact characters the most. Characters like Vader, where it's just like if you don't kill Vader, he's gonna just murder everything.
yeah, the thing about it is it's actually like pretty easy to turn backup off because it just requires the unit that's providing backup to be suppressed for it to be turned off.
Yeah, which for most units is still for most core units is still just one suppression.
Right.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like if you hit a backup unit with a suppressive gun, it's now off. So
Yeah.
sort of whatever. Um,
Related,
so yeah,
sorry, real quick related while we're talking about suppression. To get a cover benefit, you actually have to be suppressed, not just have a suppression token.
yep. So you have to have suppression tokens equal to your courage value.
Yep, to get your 6-up save.
Woo!
To get your t-shirt save. Yeah.
Congratulations, everybody.
I feel like the cover it would feel a lot better to me if it was just like one die facing better. Like if heavy cover was a red die with regular blocks, no surge, and if light cover was like a surging white die. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Clones might be busted at that point.
Well, yeah,
And
maybe. I don't know.
also B1s with like red surging cover saves would be
Not red surging.
sorry, not red surging. Like just red cover
Yeah.
saves in general would be
I mean, maybe that's too far in the opposite direction. I mean, what I'd really love is just go back to a static benefit and provide more player agency to actually remove that benefit. But anyway, yeah,
decisions were made.
yeah. There's no going back. What's the quote from The Incredibles? I never look back. Distracts from the now. That's yeah. Anyway, all right, back up. Suppression cover. Yeah, I think that's it for like we can go through and hit all the keywords and all the other stuff that changed at some point on a future episode. There's way too much. And we're running out of time and we haven't even talked about the roadmap yet. So
that's fair. We will tell you all what's completely broken and busted in Star Wars Legion Reloaded some other time.
Yep. Sorry, excuse me.
I'm sorry, did you say okay.
Yeah. Which I have no complaints about personally. But
yeah, you say that not having been on the receiving end of it yet.
I may also be on the receiving end, but I will definitely be on the dishing end.
Sure.
So
This is where the fun begins.
that's right. But he's not a hero of the Clone Wars anymore. Maybe, probly.
I mean, rules as written, he's definitely a hero of the Clone Wars.
But he's not supposed to be. All right, we'll talk about that on a future episode. For now, let's hit the roadmap because there's some cool stuff in here. Most of these are. Where's my roadmap? So let's talk about the stuff that they gave us actual unit cards first for.
Sure.
For first, we got the Rebel Sleeper Cell.
Yep.
I was a little disappointed that there was no like hidden token shenanigans here, but
I
uh,
mean,
anyway, so basically they're 70 points. They have it's a 6 model unit. They have pistols that throw double black and they surge in both directions. They have a white die save, obviously. Uh, they also have black, white, and melee.
I
Um,
think this after playing New Legion, I think this unit's going to be busted.
I mean, 6 models for 70 points. You're throwing 12 dice. Um,
I've been throwing 5-man full arc pools at range 2 on turn 1 with consistency. This unit has the same engagement profile as far as like time to target.
and they're substantially cheaper and they surge.
Yeah.
Yeah. They also have nimble, which seems like it's not super relevant on them until you look at the Astromech upgrade, which gives them free dodges for being
Yes.
near points of interest, which
Which
you're gonna
turns
be
out you're
most of
doing
the time.
anyways.
Yeah.
Yep.
They have Scout 2. So there you go, checking the Scout box.
Yep.
And they have Tactical 1. So they also check in the aim
That's
box.
what I'm saying. They're like very, very close to full arcs, at
Yeah.
least in offensive output. I think they don't have sharpshooter, if I'm recalling
They do
correctly.
not have Sharpshooter.
But 2 extra black surging dice is basically effectively having sharpshooter. So yeah, no, I think these guys are gonna be really good.
Yeah, they have a Rebel Marksman, which
That
looks
is
terrible.
so I thought about this.
Well, let's talk about what it does. And
Yes, yeah,
then,
yeah, yeah.
so it is 28 points, which is almost half the points cost of the entire squad for one model.
Yep.
As an action, it's basically a mini Amban, but you only get a result on a surge or a crit. So what is that, 25%?
Yeah, I think that this is really hilarious because they specify the die color you have to roll, and then they specify surge or crit.
Yeah, which
It
has nothing
actually
to do
makes
with the
me
die
feel like
color.
this might be a misprint,
Like maybe it's supposed to be
like
hit.
a hit and a crit.
Okay.
But it is misprinted on the Riot Control Squad guy too.
It's the
So
same on the riot controller
So
squad.
if it's
Yeah.
misprinted, it's misprinted in both places. I only say that because it makes no difference what color die you roll.
Yes.
If
They could say roll an attack die.
yes.
Yeah.
Anyways, if it is as printed, and that is what it's supposed to be, I do think it is bad because it's an action for the entire unit to do
Yes.
a damage to something 25% of the time. Now, with that being said, this is a repeatable effect in that you can take multiple Rebel Sleeper Cells and multiple Marksmen, or
Yep.
multiple Riot Control Squads and multiple Riot Marksmen, or whatever they're called. And it doesn't provide an armor save. It's like Amban,
It's just
and
automatic damage.
it's just automatic damage, which is notable because normal snipers in the game have a really hard time getting through backup.
Yep.
This doesn't care about backup.
Right.
So I think that this thing is expensively priced
Because it's
because of
meant to get
those
around
reasons.
backup. Yeah.
It is, yeah, it seems like it's the thing that kind of it's the silver bullet, if you will. Whether the silver bullet is good or not, it probably won't be, but man, if you lose Yoda to this, it's gonna feel real bad. It also shoots the table.
Yeah. It's not, it's
There's
unlimited
no
range,
range restriction.
which is the same as Amban.
I believe so. The main difference between restrictions as far as Amban goes in this is that Amban can hit something that's engaged.
Right.
This cannot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could see a world where you take like Din and 3 of these guys. That would be expensive, but then you could potentially dish out like 4 unavoidable wounds every turn,
And
which would be
like,
pretty significant for murdering characters.
yes, and also like if they're already like on top of the point and you don't need to move them, taking a 25% pot shot at like Darth Vader, like
Yeah. Why not?
in addition to your normal attack,
Right.
right? Like, um, isn't terrible.
Yeah.
But I do think that like efficiency wise, that upgrades garbage. Um,
But again, maybe that's a good thing because
if it was, it goes in the bucket of if this upgrade is good,
it's
it's
too good.
not going to be fun.
Yep. Yeah. Which is not a good place for an upgrade to be, but I agree. It's either going to be way too expensive or it's going to be
It's going to be everywhere.
correctly costed and then everywhere and terrible feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
The way Amban would be if it was good.
Correct.
Yeah.
They also incidentally they have debt packs, which is a melee profile with a single red dice instead of. So that we can talk about this in the unit cards thing, but they completely removed like bomb tokens. All of the bombs are now basically just grenades that also work in melee,
That is not true.
except for Sabine and Bosk.
There you go.
Yeah,
And Cad Bane.
and Cad Bane. Although his only ever hit one target because of how it works. So
Yeah, I think outside of some pretty unique circumstances, yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I guess these are like they use them like bricks and they bludgeon people with them. I don't know. Using an explosive in melee seems like a terrible idea.
Hey man, I mean, I'm good. I was just gonna make a joke, and I'm not gonna because
Yeah,
it's in
no.
poor taste.
Yes. Doesn't seem like something that would be in a Star Wars game, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Ride Control Squad.
Uh,
These guys are 50 points. They are a core unit. They have charge and hold the line, which basically upgrades their surge chart to get surges while they're engaged. Because they're stormtroopers, they don't normally surge. Their base profile is a stormtrooper profile. They have a white die at range 1 to 3, although they don't surge, so I guess that's different, right? So that's a worse white die. That's a B1 white die, shall we say, for their blaster rifle. But they do have a black stun baton in melee, which is also suppressive. So that's interesting. And then, of course, they can take the security droids. They get 2 security droids for 30 points, and they're basically the same, except they have a red dice in melee with impact 1.
yeah, I think they're just cool miniatures that you get to kind of add to the squad.
Yeah.
You know,
They look really awesome.
they do, and frankly, units with charge, I think, are actually
Really good in this.
if you as long as you can deliver them to target,
Right.
I think like probably everything else in the game, you're gonna want to slap recon intel on these guys.
Yes. Recon Intel, by the way, now it's 5 points, and I think it's basically mandatory, but as close to a mandatory upgrade as you can get.
Yep.
Yeah, Rebel Supercell also, we saw a fully painted, they showed fully painted versions of both of these, and they look awesome.
They do.
So.
They look really good.
Crab droids. These basically look like spider droids with scout and scouting party for some reason. I guess that's like droids riding on top of them, which is kind of neat. But they're basically like crab droids with scout and scouting party, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me that this is like what we got previewed like 3 or 4 new unit cards, and like all of them have deployment abilities.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is a coincidence.
The
But
stormtroopers don't.
yeah, but everything else does, and it
Yeah.
seems intentional. Yeah, I mean, scouting parties pretty gonna be pretty busted on everybody that has it, including Clone Captain Rex. So the fact that these crab droids you can take and like hand out multiple instances of scout to units that don't have it, it seems interesting to me.
Well, it's especially relevant for droids because most droids don't have gear slots.
Yes.
So unless they natively have scout on their card, most droids cannot take recon intel and they cannot benefit from scout, which I mean they got some other interesting buffs and stuff, but that seems like a huge drawback to me in this new edition. for the droid faction in general, for separatists.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
But
But it turns out you're just going to take 3 crowd droids and
yeah, take 3 crowd
solve
droids.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
they do have red saves, so I guess that's a difference from the spider droids. And of course, they don't have an ion weapon, but otherwise, their weapons look kind of broadly similar, and they have armor too.
yeah.
So
I think the main thing is that these guys are much quicker and faster than the spider droids.
are they? Spider droids are speed too.
I just like they're going to be on the board. They're
Oh,
like,
but with Scout
yeah,
makes
yeah,
them.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
fair. But yeah, their
Uh,
actual speed is the same.
uh,
The same size base, same speed. But yeah, Scout makes a difference there. All right. And then the rest of the stuff is just miniatures. Very cool looking miniatures, by the way. Aqua droids,
yep, which we
which look
saw.
very large.
Yep.
Um, the ARF troopers with a Jedi who I
Yo,
presume is a squad leader,
we got to
which
talk
is the
about
New Republic commander.
what they did dirty to my DC-15s.
Deleted them from the game.
Yeah.
I would say that's about as dirty as you can do, at
Um,
least temporarily.
well, here's the thing, right? They're releasing a new clone marksman squad or something they're calling it, which is not ARF troopers,
Right.
notably.
Yep.
It's not even on. Oh, sorry, it is on here. It's Q3 2025.
I certainly didn't see a
Um,
like
and
a well they do, yeah, I guess they do have some renders here for what that's supposed to look like.
yeah, it's like long range DC-15 squads, which is great. But that means not only did you delete my DC-15 models from the game, but when you reintroduce DC-15s, they're not gonna be the same sculpts. They're not like the same.
Yeah.
My DC-15s are gonna be soft plastic,
Right.
and you want me to put them in hard plastic squads where they all are gonna look different? Come on, man. Sorry. This is I was pretty hot about this.
That's fair.
As
Yeah.
someone who really enjoys playing DC-15s and clones, and I feel I'm feeling some type of way. Um, not a happy camper.
I mean, fair, but also clones are all phase twos now. So
That also pisses me off. And let me explain why. As the
okay.
proud owner of 6 phase 1 squads and 6 phase 2 squads, I now have 6 squads of clones that are never ever going on the table.
Hey, you can just double your squad sizes and then you use all of them. Let's table this until we get to the clone episode because there's a lot more. I think on balance, there's a lot for clone players to be excited about. There are definitely some things for them to be salty about. So anyway,
Yeah.
all right, ARF troopers with the Jedi squad leader, super cool. Stormtroopers and Rebel troopers, we got a look at the actual painted new sculpts for those. They both look great.
Yeah, this is
Rebel
gonna
troopers have a
be
zillion alien heads and stuff that you can put on, which is really
yeah.
cool.
This is gonna be the year of the reprint. Also, Rebel Troopers and the Rebel Sleeper Cell, the heads and all of those are supposedly interchangeable.
And the commandos.
And the commandos, yes.
Yeah. I don't know if it's all 3 of those or if it's just the Rebel troopers and the commandos.
I think they said that you could, like, with the slightest knife work, you can make them work in the sleeper cell too.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, they'll look roughly the same size miniature. Then it seems like the head, if these are hard plastic, obviously the head is a separate piece. So yeah, they look awesome. I love the paint jobs too on these, by the way. Whoever painted those, I don't know who that was, but if you're listening,
Well done.
nice work. Yeah, there's also new Scout Troopers and Rebel Commando resculpts. Again, look awesome. Personally, I think the Rebel Commandos look a lot better than the Scouts.
Yeah, the Scout Troopers kind of look like they've maybe had too much to eat.
They look a little chunky. Especially, it's not just their bodies either. Like if you look at the weapons and stuff, I mean, this dude with the DLT-19, that thing is like, I mean, that is the beefiest sniper rifle I think that I've ever seen.
They're beefy boys. Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably gonna continue using my scouts
Yeah,
because I don't like these ones.
the scout sculpts are not ones where I'm like super sad about the original sculpts. So yeah, I will probably get some of these commandos because they look freaking awesome.
All the rebel stuff looks really dope.
The rebel stuff looks great. This
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to like replace all of my rebels because I spent a lot of time painting, whatever 70 rebel models I have. Um, but I, I mean, these look awesome. This was
Well,
for me. This was a shut up and take my money situation when I saw these rebel sculpts.
yeah, I think that's fair.
There's also they're resculpting all the characters for the rebels. It looks like there's this appears to be one pack, and I think they said this on the stream too. Like basically one
There.
box where you get Han, Leia, both versions of Luke and Chewie,
Yes.
which is awesome because these sculpts are all great.
I pulled my Commander Luke out because I wanted to play with him, and I hadn't played with Commander Luke in I don't know what 4 years, and his his lightsaber's like
Yeah, those are like totally bent. Yeah,
it's like a more than a 90-degree angle. Yeah.
yeah. Those are. This is the original soft plastic versions of these miniatures have. I mean, they didn't age well when they first existed, so they've aged even more poorly as. But I mean, this stuff all looks great, so I'm definitely getting that and painting all of the things. There's also a new Vader, Commander Vader, in Veers.
Yep.
Vader just the disdain for everyone's existence in this pose is amazing. Veer's actually spotting things with his binoculars.
You mean I think
Pointing.
you mean guidance and things, Kyle.
Only if it's a vehicle, Mike. All right. Clone Trooper Infantry. So clones are getting like I mean, these are all phase 2 helmets. I don't know if you can give them phase 1 helmets, but
They said you could. Yeah, they're
okay.
phase 1 helmets, and there's
This is a
also
phase 1/phase 2 kit, it seems like.
well, it's farther than that. It's
Okay.
they all cannot have helmets.
Oh, you can just give them all like Space Marine style, no helmets at all. That's cool.
You got it. Yeah.
All right.
Which is cool.
Yeah, inadvisable, but cool. And finally, and then so we actually, in addition to all that stuff, we got some actual new units that they showed us renders of. We are finally getting Republic Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Both Padawan and Commander as 2 separate sculpts in the same box.
She will be available in the 501st.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool. Q2 2025. So we only have to wait another year.
Yeah. Slightly less than a year.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's happening.
Yeah, that's cool. Both those sculpts look great. This is next up. We have the Clone Trooper Marksman thing you were alluding to, which is going to be a new unit that apparently has all DC-15s and possibly you can put an RPS in. Or 2.
Yeah, I suspect you could probably put the mortar, the RPS, and the DC-15 in this unit. I just don't understand why they
removed
did
the
the
option to give them to
DC-15
normal
dirty
infantry.
when all of the other range 4 heavy weapons got left in. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, Imperial Probe Droids.
This guy doesn't care about us clone players.
Hey, I play clones too, Mike.
Okay. All right,
I also have some very cool looking DC-15s that I painted up.
Okay.
That I would like to be using, but I've always been a Z6 man. So
yeah.
All right, Imperial Probe Droids. They look cool.
It's about damn time.
Yep. Imperial High Command expansion, which includes a new pose for Krennic. He's doing his we were this close thing. But then also in here is General Taig, Tarkin, and Thrawn. So
I find Thrawn very exciting.
Yes.
And probably this thing that I am second most excited about on all of this list. The thing that I'm first most excited about is Tarkin, to be honest. Um,
Yeah, that could be cool. Curious
I
to see what they do with that.
yeah, I don't know. I just like he's always like he's the bad dude,
He
you
is the bad.
know.
He's the bad guy.
He is the bad
Yeah,
guy, you
he's
know.
the original A New Hope bad guy.
And
Besides Vader, obviously.
yeah, Vader's definitely like a bad guy, but he's not like I don't know, he's more like a minion, I feel like, in A New Hope.
He definitely is. Yeah.
You know, he's like, hey, I'm doing Tarkin's bidding, so to finally see Tarkin in this game, all of these characters, I think, are cool. I hope they do like a similar thing where we get like Mon Mothma and Bail Organa
Hmm.
and
Yep.
et
Yeah.
cetera, et
Rebel
cetera.
Rebel High Command.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We got. They didn't show us models for these, but we are going to get mounted units. Grievous on a what is this thing called? A bike,
Like they're calling it a wheel bike.
wheel bike.
I'm
Yeah, it
sure
is.
there's a technical name for it somewhere,
Yeah.
but
And then Han and Luke on Tauntauns.
I mean, I got to imagine there's also Obi-Wan Kenobi on whatever that
The lizard thing. Yeah.
That seems like a missed opportunity. If
Vader
not,
on a TIE fighter.
I'm thinking IG-88 on a swoop plate.
There you go. Yep. I mean, there's a lot
Uh,
of possibilities here.
yeah. So definitely a lot. Notably not on this list is new core sets.
Yeah, I feel like they would have specifically called that out, but or put like the Rebel Troopers and the Stormtroopers and the other resculpts in a core set, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Um,
I'm really looking forward to the first local tournaments where you have locals show up with old battle decks. I'm really looking forward to that.
I mean, there is a card pack on here listed in Q3 of next year, which certainly is supposed to include all the updated unit cards and stuff. I presume that it also includes the mission cards and stuff.
Okay.
I hope they give us a way to buy those along with the point of interest and the 3-inch range ruler. Because they're just
I
leaving money on the table if they're not doing that.
I mean the money aside, the whole thing like is just logistically pretty botched if they don't. I don't know because I'm joking about people coming to tournaments with incorrect battle decks, but only half joking. Like uh
Yeah.
like I don't why yeah. So yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird that you'd roll out a totally new edition and not give people and rely on the community to actually produce the tools that you need to, like the physical tools that you need to play it.
yeah, it should be noted, just for some kind of like quick replacements. The half range tool, the 3-inch tool,
Hmm.
the Shatterpoint range 2 tool is exactly 3 inches.
Okay.
So it is usable as a range half tool if you have a Shatterpoint box.
There's also like a million, 3 inches is a pretty common range in other games too, like 40K. So there's a million like third party. I definitely have somewhere from my 40K days. It's like a clear ruler where one side is 6 inches and the other side is 3 inches.
Yeah,
So there's lots of stuff out there like that, but I feel like the 3-inch tool is going to be a little bit easier to find actual like physical plastic stuff for than the two
the
inch diameter thing, which I mean, clearly in a pinch you just use your deca bases or whatever, but I think most of those are going to be basically 3D printed.
yeah. Um, I think I definitely there are community members trying to like figure that out and definitely I think source them for their communities. So,
Yep.
I would recommend teaming up with your local game store group to figure that out if you have a local game store group. So
Yep. All right. Well, that was a lot. And
and
we didn't even get to any of the unit
we
changes.
didn't even scratch the surface.
Which, yeah. Or we didn't even get to all the rules changes either. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm excited to talk about the unit changes next week.
Yeah, I would encourage people to drop in the comments which faction you'd like us to do first.
Yeah, because I think it probably does make sense to do these faction by faction because there
Uh,
are a significant number of changes for each faction already.
Yes, for sure. And so I think it's probably going to be like a whole episode for faction. So, um, if you really want to hear about your faction, drop it in there, and maybe we'll do that, or we'll do whatever isn't that to spite you.
Yeah, maybe we could put out a Facebook poll or something too and see what
Yeah.
people want us to talk about first. So,
Um,
but yeah, I know which one I want to talk about first.
oh yeah, which faction is that?
It's actually not Republic.
I actually think Republic's. Yeah, I think Empire is the most interesting.
Yes, I agree. I think I'd like to talk about Rebels first because that's where my original Legion heart lies, so to speak.
Sure.
And I've got kind of jazzed by all these cool resculpts, but um,
I will say,
yeah.
I was impressed by Rebel Troopers today.
Yeah, they're they got some good changes that make them sneaky good potentially. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm hoping I still love this game.
That's a very pessimistic note to end on, Mike.
I'm Mike.
Fresh cheese bags.